Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait a couple seconds, let folks join the call. Okay. Hello, Wayne.
Hi, Cher. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm about fourth or fifth in line here at the test site.
Okay. Well, I have my fingers crossed for you today, my friend.
Me too. Well, it was the exposure was 13 days ago, so I really don't think I have it. I'm just trying to be safe.
Okay, good. Always a good call. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I was about to say it's Thursday. It's not. It's thrown me off my schedule this week. It's Tuesday, October 20th. This is not our weekly press call. This is our monthly employment situation, where today we'll be going over September employment numbers with senior economist Ryan Gedney. I'm Cher Hovind, Deputy Executive Director, Chief Communications Officer for the Department of Labor and Employment. Today, I also have a couple of colleagues from the UI division that are joining me to help respond to any questions that you may have that I'm not prepared to respond to. If you could, when you're chatting your questions, either Admira or Phil will be the ones responding on behalf of the division. If you could just cite their response as department officials or department staff, if you'd like to use it as part of your story, that would be helpful. They didn't know that they would be joining this call until about an hour ago. So while there'll be a wealth of information, I'd prefer if you would just cite them as a department source or department officials. So with that, we'll just go ahead with a few updates. This morning, I have an update on the Lost Wages Assistance Program, a quick update on the call center, and some good news to share around a grant that we just received notice last week about an award to identify and detect fraud. And of course, just chat in your questions. Make sure my chat window is open here. So Lost Wages Assistance, this program does require a certification by those individuals who are on regular unemployment. And that certification deadline is actually upcoming on Saturday. So we have just over about 372 million folks who have received an LWA payment so far. Our estimates, we believe, perhaps were a little more generous in terms of the eligible population for LWA. So that said, based on our estimates, we think there are around about 70,000 people who could still potentially certify and receive these benefits. So again, the call to action for claimants, those folks on regular unemployment, keep in mind the PUA claimants, the gig workers, self-employed independent contractors, do not need to certify, as they already have the certification within their payment request process. So deadline to certify this coming Saturday, the 24th. Of course, we will continue to make LWA payments after that certification date, as there are holds lifted on claims and what have you moving through the adjudication process. But for those UI claimants on regular unemployment needing to certify, they have just a few more days to do that, Saturday the 24th. Let's see, call center activity. We continue to move folks at the back of the line waiting for a callback to slots that open up earlier. In fact, we had 200 callback slots that opened up. So we are calling those folks who are waiting for a callback and moving them into an earlier opportunity. No-shows are still a problem for us, however, and we continue to see those increase. We're trending almost a third of callback requests are resulting in no-shows. We're also just doing a spot check to see the reasons for a callback, and it still appears that a lot of the reasons for a callback, the questions can be found through answers on the website, if they use the automated VA to get claim-specific information in some of our videos. So continue to encourage people to explore other opportunities to get the information before requesting a callback. Again, and only request a callback if you absolutely need to speak to somebody, have an issue on your claim, or something else that's complicated, not easily solved online or through other resources. We've completed about 80,000, nearly 80,000 callbacks to date. And again, we'll continue as staff are trained and we augment the call center staff continue to move people both from the back of the line up to earlier slots and identify ways to get people the help that they need sooner rather than waiting later. So did want to speak a little bit about overpayments. This was last week's issue. A couple of things and reminders that we reported. Number one, we did email about 9,000 claimants who had overpayments set on their claim because we were able to determine within, again, this is the PUA application, that there was confusion, particularly among gig workers, on how to report net, gross income, profit, and loss as required per the feds. And so because in the wage review, we determined there was confusion, duplicate fields with the same number of wages added, as an example, indicated to us they didn't understand the reporting mechanism. We flagged those claims as overpayments. We notified those individuals last week, and they need to take no action. They will still see an overpayment notice potentially when they log into the application. But again, if they were one of the 9,000 people that received an email from us, they do not need to take an action, and we'll issue further communication and update those screens within the application accordingly. There is, however, a population that had an offset as a result of an overpayment because of their monetary redetermination. Those folks do have appeal rights, as we discussed last week, and we will be notifying those folks sometime this week on how to proceed with that appeal. Now, keep in mind, this is only an appeal to the monetary determination. It's not an appeal if you had an overpayment for other issues, such as fail to report wages, fail to conduct a valid work search, earning benefits while working. A variety of issues contribute to overpayments, not just monetary determination. But those folks who we issued a determination to actually have in their correspondence in the application a form that we sent them when we told them they had an overpayment, and that form includes appeal rights. So while we are going to email these folks later this week, they don't need to wait for a communication from us. They can actually log into the PUA application and navigate to their correspondence screen. And the statement is the notice of wages and possible charges. And that will walk them through how to appeal that monetary determination. And then lastly, we are excited to report that last week we were notified we received a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor for $1.2 million to augment our existing fraud detection efforts. This will go to staff training, better integration with national resources and databases that share fraud information. And it's specifically within the PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and PEUC program. PEUC provides the additional weeks of benefits once somebody has exhausted their regular UI benefits. And so these two programs seem to be those that trend to have a higher fraud rate. And so the feds have recognized this, and states were able to apply, and we're happy to say we received that funding. So look forward to keeping you posted on how we use that to augment our existing fraud efforts for prevention and detection. So with that, pause for a second, see if we have any questions. I know Ryan has a lot of content to share for September's updates. So we'll go ahead and pause, chat in your questions, and I'll turn it over to Ryan. And let's just go through September's employment situation.
Thanks, Cher. And first, I'll actually just start off with the most recent UI data. And then if you all have any questions on that, we can answer those. If not, then we could just transition to the September employment situation data. Starting with the most recent initial claims data available. That's for the week ending October 10th. Again, Thursday morning, we'll release data through October 17th. The department processed over 6,242 regular UI initial claims for the week ending October 10th. The spike over the last 2 weeks, again, is related to that quarter change effect I have discussed over the past couple calls. In addition, 2,532 PUA initial claims were registered for the week ending October 10th. Regular UI continued claims were relatively unchanged for the week ending October 3rd at 123,600. And that's compared to 126,300 the week prior. Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC. Continued claims jumped up to over 44,000 for the week of the 3rd, and that's due to more claimants transitioning from regular UI to the PEUC program. PUA had a little under 65,000 continued claims for the same week. Those three programs combined for around 232,500 continued claims for the week of October 3rd. 46.2 million in regular UI benefits were paid for the week of October 10th, while an additional 13.6 million was distributed to PEUC claimants, and 18.8 million was paid in pandemic unemployment assistance benefits. Through yesterday, a total of 372 million in benefits from lost wages assistance, or LWA, have also been distributed. Finally, an update on the borrowing status of the UI Trust Fund. About 452 million has been borrowed from the Federal Unemployment Account, or FUA, as of yesterday. Now 19 other states, along with the Virgin Islands, are also borrowing from FUA. So 2 more states are now actively borrowing money from FUA from when we last spoke. Approximately 37.2 billion has been borrowed so far, with 6 states accounting for 6 states have actually borrowed more than $1 billion each, and that's California at 14.2 billion, New York 8.2 billion, Texas at 5 billion, Illinois at 2.5 billion, Massachusetts 1.8 billion, and Ohio at 1 billion. But those are all the talking points I had for UI. I know there was some questions about what do air transportation claims look like. We only have, this is kind of an early peek. We haven't released the data yet, but for the week ending October 3rd, claims did uptick for scheduled air transportation industry. 161 initial claims for that week. That is the highest weekly total since the beginning of June. And I do expect those numbers to continue to increase throughout October. And you guys can either, if you're interested in those numbers, you can email us, inquire for that, or I could talk about it in our next press release on November 20th. So not seeing any questions, let's just keep driving on here and transition into the employment situation for September. As always, the data I will discuss today are based in parts on estimates from 2 surveys. Statistics like the unemployment rate, labor force, total employment, and the number of unemployed are derived from a survey of households. And this is otherwise known as the current population survey. Simply put, the household survey is meant to capture the employment and labor force status of individuals within Colorado during a given time. The household survey also includes the self-employed, independent contractors, farm workers, and those not attached to a traditional payroll employer. However, we are unable to break those out at a state level. Non-farm payroll jobs estimates come from a survey of business establishments and government entities. And these are intended to measure the number of jobs, not the number of people employed. These estimates exclude employees in agriculture, private households, and the self-employed. As we noted in today's release, the reference period for the establishment and household surveys was the pay period or week that contains the 12th of the month. Therefore, these data provide a snapshot of Colorado's employment situation during continued stages of the governor's Safer at Home order, which results in a return to work for more Coloradans. Revisions to September data, along with preliminary estimates for October, will be released Friday, November 20th. Shifting on to results from the household survey, Colorado's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate fell slightly in September, moving to 6.4% compared to 6.7% in August. The decrease in the unemployment was due to stronger growth, over the month growth in total employment compared to monthly gains in the labor force. Total employment grew by about 63,000, while gains in the labor force grew by 59,000, which causes a decrease in the unemployment rate of close to 4,000. Not the unemployment rate, the total number of people unemployed. The state's employment to population ratio increased for the 5th consecutive month, moving from 62.3% in August to 63.6% in September. And that ranks as the 7th highest rate in the nation. Colorado's rate in February was 67.7%, while it was at a historically low share of 58.3% in April. In September, Colorado was tied with Georgia for the 22nd lowest unemployment rate in the nation. Nebraska had the lowest rate at 3.5%, and Hawaii had the highest rate at 15.1%. The US seasonally adjusted unemployment rate decreased from 8.4% in August to 7.9% in September. As a reminder, both the Colorado and US unemployment rates peaked in April at 12.2% and 14.7% respectively. And I do see a couple questions coming in. I'll go ahead and just address those after my talking points here. As we mentioned, but feel free to continue to submit questions. As we mentioned in today's press release, the 5 counties with the highest not seasonally adjusted unemployment rates were Huerfano, Summit, Gilpin, Pueblo, and Denver. Among the 7 metropolitan areas in the state, Pueblo had the highest rate at 7.5%. Fort Collins and Boulder had the lowest rates at 5.2% and 5.3% respectively. Grand Junction, Colorado Springs, Greeley, and Denver all had rates between 5.8% and 6.5%. It is recommended to compare all the sub-state rates I mentioned to the statewide not seasonally adjusted unemployment rate, which was 6.2% in September. I have mentioned over the past several employment situation calls, the estimated share of unemployed Coloradans who are on temporary layoff versus permanently separated from their employer. In September, we estimate that slightly more unemployed persons were on permanent layoff compared to temporary, about 42 to 40% respectively. Now, that continues the shifting trend from April, when approximately 82% of Colorado's unemployed were on temporary layoff versus 10% permanently laid off. Last month, the median length of unemployment duration increased to a little over 21 weeks compared to 17 weeks in August. The 21 weeks is significant because that exceeds the median length of unemployment duration for individuals in Colorado during the height of the Great Recession, when it was 20 weeks. This is a trend that we will certainly continue to monitor as this current recession progresses. As a reminder, the duration data comes from the household survey and reflects duration for all types of unemployment. It is not related to duration of individuals receiving unemployment insurance benefits. Additionally, the share of Coloradans unemployed long-term, again, that's more than 26 weeks, that jumped to 25% in September, which is a significant increase compared to August when it was 15%, and from April to June when that share hovered around 5%. During normal economic periods, the long-term share typically ranges between 15 and 25%. While throughout the Great Recession, approximately 40% of unemployed individuals were unemployed for 27 plus weeks. Finally, the share of individuals in Colorado's labor force who are working part-time but would prefer full-time hours declined to around 6% in September. That translates to just a little under 200,000 individuals. That is equivalent to the ratio in July. These types of individuals are categorized as involuntary part-time or underemployed workers. Additionally, in this definition, part-time is determined as anything less than 35 hours. Since April, the involuntary part-time rate has ranged between 6 and 9%. In comparison, the rate was between 5 and 6% during the Great Recession and trended around 2.5% and 4% during the economic expansion. So I'm going to pause there before I transition to the establishment survey. Look at these questions, which seem to be related to either claims activity or our household survey. So Charles says all my Western Slope counties, Mesa, Montrose, Garfield, Delta, Moffett, Rio Blanca have unemployment rates lower than the state average. That is never the case. Any idea what's up? Charles, some of it may be due to just lower claims activity relative to the rest of the state, lower concentrations in industries that were more severely impacted by COVID-19 shutdowns and subsequent slow recovery, say retail, leisure and hospitality. So those are just some possible reasons why those particular areas may be trending lower than they usually do compared to the rest of the state. Aldo asks, we've had some big swings in household survey the past 3 months. What do you think that might be contributing to? Some of it honestly could be some data volatility. Again, this is a survey of households. Response rates have declined during the recession for obvious reasons. So from a data perspective, we could be seeing more volatility than we're used to in the household survey. We are, however, seeing pretty consistent upward trend in employment to population ratio. It's really from that in the labor force and out of the labor force component, we're seeing the majority of the volatility. But I would say the steady decline in unemployment makes sense based on what we've seen with just looking at claims data, but also the employment to population ratio, that steady increase since April also makes sense. Dan Micah asks, Ryan, in regards to the labor force participation figures, does data have any information about those not in the labor force and the reasoning why? For example, do we know how many aren't actively searching versus how many are discouraged? Dan, we have some of that. Again, a caution, some of that data just at the state level, it's a very small sample. You could certainly get better trends, I think, at the US level. But we've seen some volatility in the discouraged or marginally attached workers. That data series, it was pretty low in September, but relatively high in August. I believe in August, the marginally attached workers represented about 3.3% of those not in the labor force. And this month, that's below half a percentage point. The majority of those not in the labor force actually tend to shift towards the older age demographic and state that they do not want a job. That's about 9 out of 10 of those not in the labor force fit that criteria. But it's certainly as if the recession prolongs and extends, certainly something we'll be looking for is, do we see more and more discouraged workers of those who have now dropped out of the labor force, have stopped actively seeking work, and are in that discouraged pile. Aldo asks, it looks like continued claims of all types are surpassing the number of unemployed by a significant amount. Even claimants should be actively looking for work. Does that reflect those working reduced hours or something else? So Aldo, that's a great question. There is some disconnect between our household survey estimates and our claims data. If you have any hours or earnings reported for, say, a reference week, you are still considered as employed in the household survey, regardless of whether or not you're receiving benefits. And I think that does explain that disconnect there. Also, the PUA activity, the household survey may not be fully capturing those that are filing claims through PUA. So there's a potential of that component being underreported. But it's primarily going to be those two factors that kind of explain the disconnect between claims data and then the unemployment figures we have from the household survey. And also recall that the household survey is specifically talking about a reference week of the 12th, while claims data, if you'll need to look at a similar similar reference week for that kind of same comparison. So the claims that contain the week of the 12th. Ed, why